What's up, guys? Blackwar here, and welcome back to another podcast. And today we're going to talk about the 2020 Tour de France and debrief it. I've done a first attempt at it on the day where Primož Roglic lost the Tour de France to Tadej Pogačar, but today will be more of a general opinion on that Tour de France. We'll go chronologically in the well, in my way of thinking, I guess. Um, but before we mention the first stage or any stages whatsoever, I think the one thing we need to praise is the organization of the Tour de France. Now, we all live right now in an interesting and tough period. Obviously, with COVID, no one really knows what they can or cannot do. No one really knows what tomorrow will be made of. And it was a big challenge for the organization to manage to do a Tour de France. A lot of people thought that it probably wouldn't be able to reach Paris. None of them, well, a lot of people actually didn't think it'd be able to leave Nice. And to have managed a 3 week Tour de France with some spots with spectators, some without, to have no COVID cases in the professional peloton. I'm not talking about the staff or the organization, but just to have managed to do the Tour de France and bring every rider safe and sound in Paris. First of all, I think that is possibly the biggest thing that the Tour de France has done, and it shows that if you've got a proper organization, you can bring a race to its end and safely. So if the Vuelta does the same thing, I feel like the Spanish race will be good. But enough talk about COVID. You're not there for that. Uh, so as I said, we're going to go chronologically. I won't talk about every stage. However, I feel it was necessary to talk about the first stage because the first stage, um, well, decided a lot of things for the Tour de France. By a lot of things, I do mean mainly one. There has been a crash late in that stage, in the final 5 or 6 kilometers after Tony Martin had decided to cancel every offensive due to a heavy rain in the outskirts of Nice, which had seen Miguel Angel Lopez hitting himself so violently into a pole without any consequences, at least for the Colombian. There had been a crash towards the end involving the likes of Pavel Sivakov, which we'll see struggling during the entire Tour de France, but mainly Thibaut Pinot. And although on paper it didn't look like too bad of a fall, uh, it would mark the end for Thibaut Pinot's hopes of winning the Tour de France this season, and maybe of winning the Tour de France ever. So not a great first stage for the French riders. A stage that saw Alexander Kristoff winning and taking the first yellow jersey ahead of Mats Pedersen. A yellow jersey that will be taken by Julien Lafilippe on the second stage, where he'll edge Marc Hirschi on the line. Marc Hirschi, who will be a recurring theme during the Tour de France. Maintaining the subject on Julien Lafilippe, he probably would have hoped to maintain his jersey until the Mont Aigual. Well, he didn't. He didn't. That was one of the first talking points of this Tour de France on stage 5. 17 kilometers to go on a flat stage. Julien Lafilippe gets a bottle on the side of the road by one of his trainers, which turned out to be his cousin, I believe, or uncle, one of the two. Uh, Sadly, he was within the final 20 kilometers. So, penalty, lost 20 seconds. Adam Yates is the new yellow jersey of the Tour de France. That was the first thing that kind of like caused a bit of an upskirt in the Tour de France, mainly as well in France because I mean we're French, so yeah, we weren't big fans, but the rules. So we've got a new yellow jersey in Adam Yates. Making our way through this Tour de France, we're gonna go to stage 7. Stage 7 between Millau and Lavore. On paper, it didn't look like a tough stage at all. But oh my god. Oh my god. The team spaced a lot. I think it was Bora pacing. I know Ineos joined in later on. Um, but on a stage that looked, as I said, benign, 170 kilometers of flat, a lot of riders for the GC would lose. A lot of, well, at this point, basically hope of winning the Tour. The likes of Tadej Pogacar, Mikel Landa, and Richie Porte both losing a minute, I think, or a minute 20, actually, on a Premier Roglic and the still yellow jersey, Adam Yates. Maybe a lack of inexperience, or lack of experience, actually, for Tadej Pogacar, for the two others. It wasn't necessarily something we expected. Also, it was interesting to see that at this point, Thibaut Pinot was in the first group, which, for a lot of people, was a good sign. But oh boy, were we wrong. Because the next stage is the stage that French people did not like. We entered the Pyrenees. Perros-Sourdes was the main climb, with I believe also maybe the Port de Balès. And despite a crash by Romain Bardet, this wasn't the baddest, the worst thing for France. Thibaut Pinot basically surrendering in like the early slopes of Balès. It was so sad to see. Just everyone reminding everything reminding us of the previous year where we saw him just on the side of the road in tears. This year, no tears, no side of the road, no car, no withdrawal, no withdrawal. Sorry, but just another chance missed for Thibaut and for France. On that this time, we were still backing Romain Bardet and Guillaume Martin, but they weren't GC contenders. Let's be honest. Moving on to stage 9, a stage which saw the first win on the Tour de France of Tadej Pogacar, just ahead of Primož Roglic, but mainly of Marc Hirschi. Marc Hirschi, who that day did the entire stage basically on his own, tried everything he could, but did not get the win. That is his second podium on the Tour de France. But Marc Hirschi, we'll talk about him a bit later, definitely worthy of the price he won at the end of the Tour. Then followed a rest day, a sprint stage, and potentially one of the most controversial talking points of this tour. Stage 11, Châtelaillon-Plage, Poitiers. Another sprint stage. The day before, Sam Bennett had won in Ile de Ré. Today, Caleb Ewan took the first step ahead of Sam Bennett and Wout van Aert, but the podium didn't look like that. On the second step of this podium was 7-time green jersey winner Peter Sagan, who got declassed or disqualified of the sprint, I guess, for something that on the heat of the moment, I was backing the decision. On the heat of the moment, I felt like Peter Sagan had done something wrong. I've rewatched the sprint many times, and although Wout van Aert doesn't make too much movement, he does somewhat swerve on the right, and Peter Sagan gets stuck in the barriers. Now, there is some contact, of course, but then again, you have to remember that this is cycling. Cycling can be a sport of contact. Crashing is part of cycling. You can't prevent it. And the good thing is, there was no crashes this time. Then sure, it was to prevent potentially future accidents. But I feel like this decision might have been taken into consideration. Well, what might have been taken thinking of what happened in Poland. For those who do remember the Groenewegen and Fabio Jakobsen incident, and I feel like this had a weight on the decision of the commissaires and the jury to disqualify Peter Sagan, because overall it wasn't that bad of a sprint from Peter Sagan. It genuinely was not. And Pete Sagan lost, I think, 47 points for the green jersey that day. Potentially the thing that made Sam Bennett win the green jersey. Sure, mathematically it was still possible to get it back for Pete Sagan, but I think in the mindset, things had changed drastically for the Slovakian rider. Then instead of talking about just the next stage, I'm going to talk about a team, the team Sunweb. Because they came close on stage 2 with Marc Hirschi, they came even closer on stage 9 with Marc Hirschi, but the final week basically of Sunweb, final week and a half, is genuinely a masterclass. First of all, they've taken the win in Saran, with Mark Hirschi, who finally gets his maiden win on the Grand Tour. And then 2 days later, they would reiterate the performance with a stage win in Lyon, and they would even win stage 19 as well. A very interesting stage 19, actually. But Sunweb, for a team that didn't come out with any leaders, and also for a team that a lot of people, me included, felt they messed out by not taking messed up, sorry, by not taking Michael Matthews. They've proved us wrong. They really have. They have a culture of the win, and it is so nice to see and so refreshing to see a team coming on the Tour de France. No one on paper favorite to win on any kind of situation or terrain, and still managing to beat the leaders because no one really wants to chase them or because they're just the strongest. And it was just very nice to see Sunweb. Definitely one of my favorite teams to watch on this Tour de France, and I felt like it's going to become a favorite team or a team that a lot of people like following this tour. Next year they'll get Romain Bardet. We'll see if they can inject that culture of the win in the Frenchman. If they can, that's going to be interesting. We'll see what Romain can do in the German established team. But yeah, Mark Hirschi finally getting his win. Zoran Gravenesen getting 2 Ws on this Tour de France as well. Absolutely phenomenal for him. Moving on to stage 13, a stage won by Daniel Martinez ahead of Leonard Kemner and Maximilian Schachmann. But that wasn't the main thing. During the peloton sprint, a sort of a hierarchy appeared. And said hierarchy so that Primoz Roglic was worthy of his yellow jersey. Tadej Pogacar was there. Richie Porte and Mikel Landa surprising us. Mainly Richie Porte surprising us to finish basically third of the leaders. But one guy had missed out, losing 30 seconds that day, was Egan Bernal. And he looked different on the bike. We had never seen Egan like that. And in a post interview, he would say that he was as well or as good as he could have been. Now, was it just to gas him up and to hide the fact that he wasn't feeling well? We probably will never know. We probably will never know. But that was the first sign of weakness by the Ineos Grenadiers during this Tour de France. And mainly the first sign of weakness by the number 1 jersey. Signs of weakness that we'll see on stage 15 as we've entered the Alps, Lyon Grand Colombier, and very early in the Grand Colombier, Egan Bernal getting dropped with Michal Kwiatkowski, and I think he still had another teammate, which I can't remember who it was, but Egan Bernal dropped because of the rhythm put by Jumbo-Visma, and mainly the rhythm of Wout van Aert. Surprisingly good on this Tour de France. We all knew that Wout van Aert can sprint, he can do cobbles. I did not know he could do HC climbs better than a Grand Tour winner in Egan Bernal. But yeah, not only Bernal was dropped that day, Nairo Quintana, the leader of Arkea Samsic, would get dropped by the same rhythm of Wout van Aert. And therefore let only 3 leaders fighting for the win. And Tadej Pogacar edged Primoz Roglic on the summit of the Grand Colombier. A second win for the Slovenian. 1-2 once again for Slovenia. Richie Porte still in third place, Miguel Angel Lopez following, and a very, very decent result for Enric Mas in P5, the leader of the Movistar team, showing his colors. We hadn't seen much of him, but Enric Mas showing that he is there. And then if you take a look at the top 10 that day, Mikel Landa was in the top 10, so was Yates, Uran, Alejandro Valverde, who would lose out on the top 10 of the GC, and also Sepp Kuss, a big talking point of this Tour de France, with the entire team of Jumbo-Visma. Stage 17, the stage that everyone was scared of. Grenoble, Méribel, Col de la Loze. On paper, it looks like one of the toughest climbs ever. First time the Tour de France would actually climb it. I think it had been used once on the Tour de l'Avenir, but the Tour de France peloton was going for the first time on this climb. And what a climb! What a climb! 24 kilometers, I believe, of pure hell, with sure wide roads at the start and a 8% gradient for the first 15, 16 kilometers, but then after Meribel, the road would get narrower and steeper, reaching like 20% at one point, maybe even 24. And on such steep terrain, it was logical to see a Colombian prevail. Miguel Angel Lopez, the leader of Astana, taking the win in on the top of the Col de la Loze, ahead of Primoz Roglic, who had managed to drop Tadej Pogacar, and also to drop a lot of the other GC guys, the likes of Richie Porte, Enric Mas, Mikel Landa, Sepp Kuss finishing in 4th place after an amazing job to catch Richard Carapaz, who had been in the breakaway the day before in Villard de Lans, who had been in the breakaway for this stage, and who will be in the breakaway for stage 18, which is possibly the image of this Tour de France, or at least one of the many images of this Tour de France. After a very tough Tour de France for the Grenadiers, coming here as the reigning champions with Egan Bernal, losing him in the at the end of the second week. Bernal, I think, withdrawing on after stage 16, I believe. Richard Carapaz, Miral Kwiatkowski winning the stage, and I do mean the two of them. Sure, on paper it is Kwiatkowski, but they crossed the line at the same time, holding hands, or at least holding shoulders, I guess, for an entire kilometer, which was a very nice image to see. However, in the peloton, things had gone a bit different. Although everyone finished in the same time, Richie Porte today was, I mean, as per usual, having his bad day, getting a puncture on the gravel section of the Plateau des Glières, which for many was heartbreaking. But he came back, and he came back because Wout van Aert brought everyone back to get 3rd place in a mountain stage. I mean, what? Genuinely, there was like 10 or 12 riders in that group, and Wout van Aert was there. Knowing that Wout van Aert was the reason as to why Rigoberto Urán, Alejandro Valverde, and Adam Yates from a yellow jersey got dropped very early in the Plateau des Glières, finishing, I think, 3 minutes behind, with the remaining French hope of the Tour de France, Guillaume Martin, after Romain Bardet had withdrawn as well from the Tour de France. Just not a great Tour for France, let's be honest. But a huge performance nonetheless by Wout van Aert that day, and a very nice image for Ineos, finally getting their win on this Tour de France. We've already talked briefly about stage 19 with Søren Kragh Andersen's win ahead or against the top sprinters, which leads us to stage 20. I've already made a podcast on stage 20, so you basically know my my thoughts and point of views. But just to make it short, Tadej Pogacar, during one of the most maddest performances I've ever witnessed in my whole 21 years of being alive, against the odds and against what looked like a very weakened Primoz Roglic, or at least a Primoz Roglic feeling that he was losing this tour, and I wouldn't say giving up, but basically shut down. He did not know what he was doing. And Tadej winning ahead of Tom Dumoulin and Richie Porte. Richie Porte, who would take 3rd place both in the stage and in the general classification, because Miguel Angel Lopez would lose more than 6 minutes that day. Just an amazing performance for the Australian who would climb on the podium of the Tour de France behind Primož Roglic and Tadej Pogačar, who would rise to the first step in Paris, the top step, sorry, in Paris, as holder of 3 jerseys. Not only did he win the yellow, he also won the best young rider and the Polka classification, edging Richard Carapaz on the time trial of the Planche Belfi. And the other jersey wearer would be Sam Bennett, the Irish rider, who not only claimed his first win on the Tour de France earlier on the Ile de Ré, he also won his first win, obviously, on the Champs-Élysées with a very, very powerful sprint, beating Mats Pedersen and I believe Peter Sagan for third place. A very strong Tour de France for a rider who is a pure sprinter, unlike Peter Sagan or Michael Matthews, who have won the previous 8 jerseys. A lot of people complain that Peter Sagan, although he's a great rider, isn't really deserving of a green jersey because it makes you think that the green jersey is for sprinters, and Peter Sagan is not, to the letter of the word, a sprinter. Sam Bennett bringing that tradition back, being the first sprinter to win it since I believe Mark Cavendish in 2011. But yeah, the Tour de France came to an end. And weirdly enough, we're basically not going to stop cycling for a while. Usually, you'd have a little break. I mean, you'd have the Classica San Sebastian, then a break for 2-3 weeks before having your new Grand Tour. We've already got the World Championships in less than a week. We've got the Giro coming up in, I believe, 2 weeks. Cycling doesn't stop. I don't know if we'll have such a mad race in Italy or in Spain. But if we can have at least as decent goosebumps as we've had on stage 20, I feel like this Tour de France or the Giro or this Vuelta will be a success. Now, obviously, we'll have talking points about the Tour de France, the tactic of Jumbo-Visma doing things that we somehow didn't understand at one point. Uh, maybe Roglic could have won the Tour on some of the stages, having a decent enough gap to hold on to to Tadej Pogačar. Sorry, no one knows. Maybe if that first crash hasn't happened, Thibaut Pinot could have been in the mix. Um, yeah, it's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions around this Tour de France. There is also right now an investigation around the Arkea Samsic, although I believe Quintana, no, I was going to say Nairo Comunicado. Nairo Quintana came out with a statement yesterday where he kind of explained everything, and I'm quite happy to see it because I don't see him as a doper, and a lot of people attacked him directly on Twitter. There's no presumption of innocence on Twitter. If there's a rumor, you're basically the culprit, and I'm happy to see that things are turning around in Nairo's favor. Nairo, who again didn't have the greatest of Tour de France, but we shall see what happens next. There's, as I said, a lot of questions, a lot of transfer movement around this Tour de France. I know Fabio Aru is going to leave UAE, or should. Miguel Angel Lopez will leave Astana. We'll see what happens in the hierarchy Jumbo-Visma, because you've got Primož Roglic, you've got Tom Dumoulin, you've got Sepp Kuss, you've got Steven Kruijswijk. These 4 riders are fighting for one leadership position, and with Roglic having a shocker on the final day, it would seem logical that someone like Tom Dumoulin would ask for a leadership position, or Kruijswijk, or even Sepp Kuss, you never know. But that not only will wrap up this Tour de France, it's going to wrap up this video. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, then please do leave a like down below. Tell me if you want me to improve my comment. I mean, to improve. Tell me things I could do to improve my commentary or my podcasting skills. It's quite tough being on his own. I won't lie. I mean, I have to maintain a constant flow. I've taken a glimpse at my notes. I just had the stages and what happened. But yeah, please let me know if there's anything you want me to change or improve, as I said in this commentary, and I'll gladly make those changes happen if that's something you'd like to see. But yeah, thank you very much for listening to this podcast. Thank you for watching the video as well. There's probably some PCM gameplay in the background. which I haven't recorded yet, but I hope it was good. And I shall see you very soon for the World Championships. I think on Thursday is the time trial, so tomorrow time trial, Sunday road race. You can still vote for my team for the road race in the community tab of my channel. My name has been Blackwar. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you guys. Have a great day. Stay safe and goodbye.
Pull up in the gold, I'm leading. But them other man need feeding. I don't wanna go Bombay. Them I don't know what I do when I go from wheeling. Leading the pack in black and I'm on with the bat. Snapping with a phone and dab. Boss up a man with a duster. Put him in the drip and sip blockbuster.